In a normal face-to-face class, generally towards the end of the semester, we do something called a peer review where you take the draft of your paper after your rough draft, after you've had some time to make the corrections that I've suggested, and you go through a peer review process. And I would encourage you to do that with one of your classmates just to trade papers. But I do want to still go through some things that are really important for you to end up with a really quality paper at the end of this course. First of all, some of the key points, and this is really difficult to do, but what we don't want to do is start paragraphs out where you say research says this, or studies say this, or Capps and Schultz say this. Capps and Schultz in a study by this, in a study by. None of that sounds professional. So don't do that. Don't start any sentence, any paragraph with research says this, studies say this, these two authors say this, these two authors did a study, any of that. The second part of that is the studies don't say anything. The authors reported something. If you still feel compelled to do that, don't write Capps or the study says this. Write Capps and Schultz as example. Report that, blah, blah, then say the rest of what you need to say. But you don't have to do any of this. Just write what it is that you have summarized or analyzed from it. Second, there's two ways to write sentences, and I want to show you an example. The first one says we used a structural equation to test the model. The second one says a structural equation was used to test the model. We need to stick with third person writing, the second sentence there. You need to leave out the word I, you need to leave out the word we, you need to leave out the word you. This needs to be very separated from yourself. You do not need to be invested in it. You don't need to talk about your own personal experiences in your writing. It needs to be third person kind of writing. Absolutely no first or second person. Expletive writing. You can write there are a couch and a table in the room, or you could write it a couch and a coffee table are in the room. They're both okay, but the second one sounds better than the other. You don't have to put those expletives at the beginning of that sentence where it says there are. And I know that that's a very difficult thing to try to break that habit because we speak that way and we tend to write the way that we speak. But when you read it, it just seems overused. You just end up with too many words in a sentence, for lack of a better way to say it. You need to analyze the articles. Don't take the articles and just lift the paragraphs out of them. I think that in the past what happens in a lot of courses is students are asked to write a paper. They take pieces of another paper, put it into their paper, stick them together, and call it good. Well, that's not what this course is about. This course is about being able to look at an article, analyze what they've said, determine the quality of their research, determine whether or not they can make the claims that they have reported. You've got the tools to use that up to this point, so that you need to be able to do that. And I'm going to show you an example towards the end of this video about what that looks like. There's a saying in graduate school that goes like this: nobody cares what you have to say until the discussion section of the paper. It's a little extreme, but it's partially true. Anything that is not cited in the lit review is considered your words, so you better be able to back it up, because if they're not cited, it's plagiarism. There, in the lit reviews I was looking at, there's times towards the end of a paragraph where there would be 2 or 3 sentences that were not supported by a citation. That's plagiarism. If you don't, that or the person who's writing that paper just came up with their own words. You can't do that right now. The entire lit review needs to be cited. All of the information that's in there needs to come from somewhere else, not from you, not from the person that's writing it. And remember, it's not just taking quotes. It's not just taking another set of words out of one paper and put it into yours. Because if you take a paragraph from another paper and put it into your paper, and you write it word for word, but you don't quote it, that's still plagiarism. So you need to read the articles and rewrite the articles in your own words, analyzing it and making a summary of what you've read. You're building an argument, not just reporting facts. You need to combine similar lines of thought. If several articles say the same thing, put all that information together and then cite the articles where that information came from at the end of the paragraph. When you write an APA, this is a little thing, but it does matter. There's two ways that you can combine the work by two authors. If you're going to put their names in the sentence, which I already told you not to do, but if you still feel compelled to do that, you use the word and then you put the year that their research article was published in parentheses. If you're citing it at the end of the paragraph, you use, I think it's called I don't know what that's called, that little sign right there. If it's in the article, you use the word. If it's in the parentheses, you use the sign. Sometimes, and there's not very many people in this class that you're going to be talking about idea or No Child Left Behind. This is the way that you cite it if you're going to write it out. Here's another way to do the same thing. But 3 to 5 authors, you do it like this. In subsequent citations, it is perfectly okay to use the phrase et al. If there's several authors. I believe if it's 6 or more authors, you can put et al. At the first time. The period at the end of the sentence is after the citation. This is considered to be part of the sentence. The period goes right there. Sources. In the rubric, you'll notice that it talks about primary sources, secondary sources. Primary sources means that you read the study. A secondary source means that you got the information out of a lit review. And in secondary sources, you'll do something called as cited in, and you need to look that up in your APA book about how to do that. If you didn't actually read the article from which the data emerged, then that becomes a secondary source. A primary source means a research article where somebody's conducted a study and you're looking at their results section. If you're using a book, that's a tertiary study. These two aren't necessarily all that bad, but the problem with them is if you didn't read the original study, you won't be able to analyze it. And if you can't analyze it, then you don't have a way of knowing whether or not what you're reading was done correctly. You need to have a conclusion to your paper. You do not need to have an abstract in your paper. If you do a peer review, and again, I really encourage you to do that. There's some documents in this module about peer reviews. It's important that you do that and you don't sugarcoat it. Writing's hard to do. You got to be thick-skinned if you're going to turn your paper over to somebody else. But I promise you, if you'll do that and you'll use the document guides for editing, you'll end up with a much better product. A couple of things I want to show you, because this is the writing is a challenge for the students. This is an example of a paper from my course in a previous semester where somebody had written this out. And this is an example of somebody who has summarized the writing of a research paper. So you can see what that looks like. And you really need to download this and take a good look at it. So what I did is I took this paper, which was okay, but not great, and I rewrote it in a way that looks like it's being analyzed. So these are the same papers. So on here, we are still getting the same information, plus we're getting a better understanding of how important this is, where the significant differences were, where the correlations were at, and how well they were correlated. This is the kind of writing. This draft 2 is what your paper needs to look like. This is a list of 10 words that you need to avoid in your paper. I've already hit on you, like, sort of, kind of, as. These are all very, very weak words. I didn't see a lot of this in the rough drafts that I went through, but nonetheless, something to consider. One thing that I did see some of is this. This document is called Weak and Wordy Sentence Openers. Again, we're talking about expletives. Do not do any of this. Do not do any of this. So when you write your paper, go through it. Make sure that none of your sentences are starting with this kind of information. It just makes for a really weak paper. Okay, if you're going to do a peer review, and I want to say this one more time, it is really a good idea to do that. You take the paper and you go through using this format to check to see how good of a job they've done. What I've seen happen is when students do this, that it will raise their paper by 5 to 6 points. It really does make a difference because somebody else is able to catch the mistakes that you're making, even things that I didn't catch the first time through it. Pay attention to your APA manual. The APA 6th edition is what we're in. It counts. Make sure that when you look at your paper that you're checking the APA in the body of the paper and that you're checking the APA in the references. The references is one of the biggest places that you can get really easy points, and I see it nearly every time that people will get 0 points for APA in the references because they will not do the things that you're supposed to do with that. So pay attention to that as well. And what I'm talking about in the references is this. This is somebody else's paper from another semester. This is wrong. That is not APA format. This is supposed to be in italics. This is supposed to be in italics. This is all supposed to be lowercase. Check it. It's worth several points, and nearly everybody will lose those points because they won't pay attention to that part. So that's it. Good luck on your final paper.